So good morning again, everybody. You saw our red terrain in the lovely showroom there. Now we're out with our CBT bike. So this is a Sinis terrain, an adventure style bike which is learner legal, 125 cc's. If we think about motorcycles, they've come on a huge amount in the last sort of even 20 years. Incredible. But bicycle, they're very similar like a bicycle, aren't they? We've got two wheels, we've got a seat, we've got handlebars. The difference is obviously we've got an engine, we've got a gearbox, a number of other things that help us to make what we call a power two-wheeler, our motorcycle. And today we're going to focus on the primary and secondary, our major and minor controls on the motorcycle, particularly for those of you who are coming to 1066, you're a new rider, you don't know a lot about it, this video is very much for you. Or you might be someone in their 40s and 50s who's back to motorcycling, hasn't ridden for 20 years, and you've got pretty rusty. So we're going to take it a step at a time. And we're going to start off by looking very much at what makes us go, and that's the throttle. Okay, so you're probably all going to be pretty familiar, particularly if you cycled, with brakes. But first up, we're going to look at the throttle, the thing that makes us go faster on a motorcycle, gets us moving, actually lets us pull away from a static position. And the throttle's obviously on the right hand side. The throttle is spring loaded. Now we want to hold it. We'll have a gloved hand. By this stage the CBT, you'll have all your kit on, whether you've bought it or whether you're using it from the school. So you'll be kitted up. We hold the throttle with a nice gentle grip, not gripping too tight. We call it soft hands, okay? And we don't want our wrist too high, and equally we don't want our wrist too low. We need to be in a position where we can open that throttle. You can see that smoother operation. That is full throttle. When we're riding, we're going to pull that throttle back incrementally, small bits at a time, because each time we move it, we're going to go faster. The throttle, you'll notice, is on a twist grip, okay? It closes automatically. But when we talk about, and your instructor will talk to you about gas on and gas off during your training, gas on and gas off. And even that simple operation can confuse people a little bit, just getting used to that and not gripping it too tightly. When we're a little bit nervous at the start with our CBT, we can sometimes be just gripping the bike far too tight. You want a nice positive grip. So as we roll off our gas, we're coming to traffic lights or a junction, we want to apply our brakes. We apply our front brake first. We use 4 fingers and we use the tips of our fingers on the lever. So it's tips of the fingers. So it's off gas, reach for brake and squeeze progressively, squeeze gently. What we don't want to do, guys, and if we're new to motorcycling and maybe you've done it on a mountain bike or a push bike, we don't want to snatch that front brake. If we panic on a bike, we snatch that front brake, that could end badly, okay, and we lose control of the motorcycle. So off gas, reach smoothly and squeeze that front brake. And obviously the more we squeeze it, the harder we apply that front brake. As we apply the brake, looking at the dynamics of a motorcycle, the front forks compress, the tyre grips the road, and our weight moves forward. And you'll feel that. You'll feel your weight going forward on the bike. Okay? So it's important that we apply that front brake nice and smoothly. Okay, guys, so I just want to reiterate that point a little bit, re-emphasize what we're talking about with the dynamics of braking on a motorcycle. So as we apply that front brake, we'll talk about the rear in a minute, you know, that puts weight over the front forks, which compresses the forks and pushes that tyre into the road. And that mechanical grip, what we call the contact patch on the tyre, increases as that tyre squidges into the road. So just by braking, the pads are braking on the discs and that's hauling the bike up, but that tyre is gripping the road more effectively. Okay, so we talked about the operation of the front brake and the way we use that on a motorcycle. Now in this section we're going to look a little bit more detail at the rear brake. You'll notice the rear brake is a pedal down here. Okay, on different bikes it's positioned slightly differently. You need to know and understand where your gear is. So I typically ride with my footrests on the pegs like that. Some riders might keep their foot here ready for rear brake. We don't recommend that you cover the rear brake. A lot of new CBT riders do that. It wears out the brakes, tires the bike out, and obviously if you keep stalling it's probably because you're covering that rear brake. So I like to ride there and I apply my front brake first, as I said, and then I engage some rear brake as well. Now when you're on your CBT, whether it's dry conditions or maybe it's a rainy day, that braking pressure is going to vary, and we'll talk you through that on the CBT. We'll coach you on that. So I'm applying my front brake, and then I've got a nice little bit of rear brake on, and that just steadies the bike. Now what I will say is motorcycling is more of an art than a science. Different riders, even very experienced instructors, do it in slightly different ways. Some are very keen on the rear brake, others use maybe a little bit less. But to be clear, it's important that we use both brakes, front brake first and then rear brake. I like to use a combination of both, but I find the rear brake really handy, so don't discount that when you're learning to ride a motorcycle for the first time. Okay, here's the clutch lever. We use, again, 4 fingers, use our fingertips. Again, nice soft controls. We don't want to be gripping things too hard, and we can pull that clutch in. We're going to talk in the next section about engaging gear. That clutch is really important. As we feed the clutch out, we find what's called the biting point. When the engine starts to engage, you'll feel the bike underneath you starting to move, particularly if you're a first-time rider and you haven't done that before. Whilst you're doing that, you can apply a little bit of throttle. Okay, so it's a little bit of throttle, and the clutch, we release it. A couple of things here in terms of don'ts. We don't dump the clutch, flick the clutch out. That's going to cause the bike to lose control, or worst case to even wheelie. The front will come up. So it's clutch out, and it's like wringing a towel, guys. It's clutch out and throttle, clutch out and throttle. You've got to get used to that coordinated movement. If you haven't ridden a manual bike before on your CBT, you might struggle with that a bit at the start. You might stall the bike, you might lose control, but with good teaching and applying yourself, you'll get that clutch control, and that's really going to help you when you get out on the road. So in the last section we talked about how important the clutch is, and the clutch is obviously really important for engaging gear. So this section is very much about gears. Now, whether you're a push bike rider or you've driven a car, not an auto, but you'll hopefully know what a gear is. Okay, enables the engine speed to be matched to the speed on the road by a system of gears. So how do we put a motorcycle into gear, you might be thinking to yourself. We're going to pull our clutch in. I'm going to turn my engine on the bike so the engine's running. We talk about a gearbox being 1 down and 4 or 5 up, okay? And in a minute I'm going to show you a simple ladder idea to help you understand that. Gears can sound complicated, but on the day you'll get used to changing gear, so let's talk about it in a bit more detail. I pull my clutch in, I press down to first gear. You'll notice that the lever comes back up to a level position. So as you move up, down through first gear and up through the other gears, 2, 3, 4 and 5, it's not like your foot's coming up in the air. That gear lever is returning. If I go into second, there's second gear, clutch in again, and third gear. And if you look at my instrument panel in front of me on the Cinis Terrain, which is a digital motorcycle, we've got what's called a gear change selector, an indicator. So it tells me now I'm in third gear. Now whilst I'm riding, I'm looking ahead because that's where all the danger is on a motorcycle, but I can glance down and think to myself, okay, I'm in third gear. And as I come to a junction, I'm going to go back down that gearbox. Second, first, I'm back into first. And if I put my foot underneath the pedal and that little snick up, the bike comes back into neutral. And neutral's when the bike isn't in gear. You can roll the bike. When you start your CBT, you'll be doing a pushing exercise with your instructor, and you'll feel the bike, green lights on, the bike is in neutral. Okay, so we looked at gear changing. Now to help you understand that in a little bit more detail for those of you really new to motorcycles, and you can see all the CBT fleet behind me in our shed, here's my nice step ladder. I'm on the step, I'm in neutral, my bike's not in gear. And what I'm going to do, as I said, is pull that clutch in, and with my left foot I'm pushing down into first gear. I'm coming off my step, I'm into first gear. And as I ride on the road and increase my throttle and my engine speed, I'm going to clutch in, I come to second gear on my ladder, and then I'm third gear, clutch in third gear, look, there I go. And if I'm going at higher speed, I'm in fourth and fifth gear. And as I go back down through the gearbox, clutch in, match the throttle to the revs, keep it nice and smooth, and back from third to second, and I'm pushing down now as I come to my junction, back into first gear. We tend to keep the bike in gear at junctions. We keep it in first gear, clutch in, so that we're ready to roll. We don't want to be faffing around, putting it into neutral and them to dance around the pegs. We want to keep that bike in first gear. When I stop the motorcycle, but I'm going to put it back into neutral at the end of my session, I'm back on my step, my bike's in neutral, my hands are off the controls, and that motorcycle's not going anywhere. Okay, so we spent some time in this CBT section going through our major controls to get the bike going and stopping. We've covered that. Now we're going to look in a little bit more detail at what we call our minor controls, and that's our switch gear. I'm just going to start off with the ignition here. Key to the right turns the ignition on the Cinis Terrain. You'll notice it's digital these days. We've got our speed, we talked about our gear change selector or indicator, the miles run, and on the left hand side we've got a little rev counter. This red switch, red typically means warning, doesn't it, in terms of motoring, and it's a kill switch. It's if you have an incident or an accident or the bike drops over and there's fuel coming out, it's hit the kill switch. When you're on CBT and you finish a session with your instructor, always turn the bike off using the key. Do not use the kill switch. On the Cinis bike here, the Terrain, it's lights to the left. Keep the lights on, okay? Now really importantly is the little switch at the bottom with the electrical symbol, and that's our electric start. This bike is fuel injected, which means a little press of that button and my bike is going to start. Let's show you. Okay, so for our last section, which is our left hand switch gear, we've moved out onto our training pad now where you'll be with your bike on your CBT learning to ride. And if we look at this left switch gear, little red triangle here, again a red warning button, and what that does is a hazard warning light. It puts all my 4 indicators on together, and if there's an accident or there's an ambulance or something's going on and we want to warn other drivers, we put our hazard warning lights on. To the left of that we've got our high beam and low beam. You'll notice in the dash you get a little blue symbol. High beam is for poor riding conditions. If it's a dark, windy, wet night and you're on a country lane, you'll raise your beam, but be aware it can dazzle other road users. So I only use my high beam, not when there's oncoming traffic. Below that, everybody, is a really important switch, and that's our indicators. They are not self-cancelling like a car. If you're a car driver, they're not self-cancelling. With a gloved hand, we're going to go left indicator. You'll see that on our switch gear, and we push in with our thumb. To cancel. And now I'm going to put my right indicator on. I can see in my instrument panel the warning lights flashing, so I know my indicators are on, and I press into cancel. On CBT, a lot of guys with a lot going on tend to leave their indicators on. That's a misleading signal. Worst case, a driver thinks that you're pulling into a turning and you're not, so that could be dangerous. You must make sure you cancel your indicators, but your instructor will help you to do that and help you remember to do that. Below, I've got the horn, which lets other road users know, aware of my presence and know where I am. We don't want to beep it aggressively at people. It's just hey guys, I'm here on my motorcycle. Okay, so there's lots to do on your CBT day, but now you're at the stage where you'll be on the pad, you'll start pulling away and stopping and riding the motorcycle. That's the enjoyable part of your CBT. But in this film and this section, we've covered our primary controls, our major controls, throttle, brakes, clutch, gears, and we'd also looked at our minor controls, all our switch gear and instrumentation around us. And as I said before, if you're thinking, crikey, that's a lot to understand, well, it's quite a lot, but once you've done it, you'll get used to it. Most people complete their CBT on the first day, but some riders might need a second day or possibly even more. If they need a little bit more training, we're prepared to give you that training so that we make you a really good, safe rider and you enjoy your motorcycling. I hope you found this section interesting. If you like what we're doing at 1066, please click the subscribe button or like, and give us any feedback on these short films that we're doing around the bike. We'll see you again next time. Thanks a lot.